Is that really what it is? I did that. Thank you so much. I can't tell you how much I enjoy this. I have been reading for graduate students at SUNY at Alder since 1980 at one place or point of time or another. And so as I was going through trying to figure out what I would read, I at first was looking at new stuff. And then I realized that none of you had actually heard any of the old stuff so that I could really do anything. And so that was really lovely.
Do I need a mic? Some.
I don't write, in fact I don't ever write about being the Writing Center director. I don't, except for I had one poem about the Writing Center. So I thought I would start with that, since for most of you that is how I know you. So I thought, all right, well I'll start with the Writing Center poem. Remedial writing. Mouse afternoons in a white cardboard box, chattering about punctuation. A life sentence, making its own way, stolen phrases leaving behind bubbles in the silence. Yes, I know. Me too. The dry paper flapping surrender, a white flag. To write, correct, yes. Eyes down to the side. To find something, to say, to please, to write. Dull resentments, anxious and or bewildered. Check, 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 check. Chickens scratching, but we are mice. Our cheeks are swollen, our corners stuffed and tattered, and there are words that make mice laugh. Some that say, what I found was a marvel, a thought ripening like a pear. What I think I mean, they say, I have so many pages to write. Today, all the other mice stop by our cardboard box to talk, the rain just now falling, everybody a little damp. And what's a few wet mice? Everything to a happy end. Mad pipers become royal footnotes, old brown beans, lost in ragged pockets, sprout sentences like wishes that dash to the sea. So, the Writing Center. This is actually one of my favorite poems of my own. You know, once in a while you're kind of like, oh, I really like this one. This one makes me laugh. Why clouds look the way they do. Because they worry about us. Because they're tiny shards of floating ice. Because they weep under pressure. Because they admire the flight of certain birds. Because they find your haircut absurd, they will float overhead, speechless, somewhat embarrassed on your behalf, kindly avoiding comment. Because they find mirrors irresistible, admiring their own perfect reflections, they pose graciously as cotton balls, beams of grace, billowing full sails in seascapes at night, a black wisp strays across the full moon's cheek just to scare you. Because they long to be what they resemble, a fire truck, a face, a leaping dog, because they're vapor clinging together as droplets, because they remember being ocean, being one, being complete with each other, because their lives are so short. I kind of like the idea of the clouds kind of being embarrassed by my haircut. Of course they are. One of the things I'm going to that I actually printed, that was published in the Barzak, and I'll read that coming up, but it needs a kind of a gloss. And my mother was a Catholic mystic and pilgrim, and so my background with my parents, with my mother in particular, was full of these really odd Catholic happenings. And so I was kind of like, all right, well, I'm going to have to kind of explain my mother a little bit. And so this is the poem that kind of explains my mother. And in the middle of it, there's a long quote that's translated from Italian into English about how to handle the Shroud of Turin. Now, y'all, do you know what the Shroud of Turin is? Do I have to gloss that? Do you know what that is? It's the shroud that supposedly Jesus was wrapped in, and then when they unwrapped him, his face was stuck to it, and so now they show this shroud around the world, you know, because it has the imprint of Jesus' whole crucified body on it. And pilgrims go from all over the world to see the Shroud of Turin. I mean, so here's the poem. My mother visits the Shroud of Turin. On a whim, one weekend near the end of summer, called to wing to Rome to see the shroud, her widowhood a flurry of pilgrimages, packed passport, sundries, wrinkle-free skirts and blouses, sensible shoes, a scapular, a rosary, her glasses. Before seeing the shroud in which, according to tradition, Jesus' body was wrapped after the crucifixion, the pilgrim passes through 3 areas that invite meditation on the figure of Christ. Obviously, no one is obligated to follow the reflection. It's so Italian, isn't it? Obviously, you're not obligated. After viewing the Holy Shroud, visitors will have the possibility to go to a chapel, one with confessors in various languages, and another with adoration of the Blessed Sacrament, which will be exposed throughout the time. No Italian, but her devotion, perfectly understood, signaled by a simple crucifix. Crowds in line for hours view the marvelous relic, but mistaken for a straggler from some clerical delegation, she is swept ahead inside, and when it is her turn before the shroud, she kneels undisturbed for nearly an hour, as long as she likes, because God wills it, because she is so quiet, so small, and prays so bravely. The ushers overlook her, another miracle of faith. So this leads into why I know what a stylite is, which is one of the poems that was published in Barzak. A stylite, back in the day, dinosaurs were back when there were these kind of pilgrims and mystics in around Anatolia and Turkey. If you were a mystic, one of the things that you might do in order to show your devotion is you would pray on a pillar. In fact, these folks would live on pillars. So, and by this I mean an actual pillar, and they would be anywhere from 12 to 15 to sometimes 20 feet high, and the saint or the holy person would go and they would get on the pillar. A lot of times they had a big platform, so it wasn't, you had a little bit more room, but you might have about this much room. And then you would live on that pillar, and that would be what you would do to show your devotion. So I always thought that, I like those kinds of saints. I'm a kind of an Alice Walker person about saints. I don't think that saints mean you're good. I think it means that God has cursed you with a special obligation. And so it's not something that if you're raised Catholic, you don't want to be a saint. Because it's not, you think it's funny, this is true. If you're a saint, you get like stigmata, you bleed, horrible things happen to saints if you're Catholic. So you don't want to be a saint. That's like, it's only you Protestants that think being saints is a good thing. The rest of us know this is not really a good thing. But stylite, the Pillar Saint's Confession. I'm not afraid of storms, needles, sleet, the keening wind, not afraid of sleepwalking off my perch in a dream of orchards, ripe apples that blush like temptation only to fall. I watch sparrows, fields green, trees leaf, cat pauses to stare. Did you like that? I love that line. Cat pauses. Oh. I'm sorry, I know I can't. I knew I would go by it, and I'm like, I love that part so much. Cat pauses to stare. The neighbors ignore me. By July, the sun is hot enough to cook meat, hot enough to wring a painful glare from the haze around the pillar. But one afternoon, a wandering swarm of wild bees enrobed me as I stood praying, fanning their wings, delicate, tracing the steps of their country dance on my skin, then lifting off. I confess, dusted in scents of rose and clover, I bowed my head, my nose buried in my folded hands, and fell and fell and fell again into temptation, remembering the soft prickling of their barbed legs, their tongues tasting my lips, my eyelids, the hollow of my throat. So it can be fun, I suppose, being this. You have bees around. This, I think, is probably one of the poems that that Sarah was referring to when she was writing these questions. It doesn't have a title yet, and it's in Barzak, and it doesn't have a title there either. I'm so sorry. I just don't know what the title is. The Edge of the City. That's probably the title. The Edge of the City. Collector, picker, junkman, hoarder, takes whatever cast-off sad toy, torn shoe, shopping cart, wrapper from a candy bar, lands there. Fence posts bow, burdened with wild grape knots and ivy, small birds roosting in the chain link, a plastic cup holds rain. The city's edge mutters to itself, its gardening haphazard, misplaced, verges tangled with old leaves, spring bulbs, green snouts poke up, daffodils, crocus, the early curls of heirloom tulips, escaped a half a century ago, abandoned perennials, pruning shears, but then the tulips. And for those of you who are new to Albany in the spring, you'll see a lot of the classic red tulips. Those are heirloom tulips. Those are back from hundreds of years ago when Albany was actually the tulip. And you'll actually see them on the verges. For no reason, you'll be driving down the thruway, and then right against the fence, there'll be these beautiful scarlet tulips. And those are escaped heirloom tulips that are like hundreds of years old and are just propagating without anybody's help. So it's really lovely to watch. This one's for Sarah, because it reminds me of some of her poetry. It's about, it's called Water Belly. Skinny, pale frogs sink into the mud they drowse in. That clammy warmth, the ooze of the still puddle, that snoozing, amphibious stalking, each vigilance, that kingdom of the vertebrae. The gold eyes seem metallic. Who wears a precious round her eyes for every day? She better guard her sticky tongue for catching. A quick whip snatches up fly snacks, a bug gulp. She dreams in someone's pond, motionless, her eye jewels lidded, biding time like bait waits. When the frogs kick away fast to escape in bubbling jets, steps at the edge, the motion exposes their luminous thighs, the strategic attraction of attention to the conspicuous, as in synchronized swimming, the athletes sequin scissoring, gaudy as banners above the surface, and perfectly timed exertions puff and blow, exhausting strokes and flutters, diving under, straining lugs burning to suck air, while tiny toenails dotted blood wave yoo-hoo. And I just, was like, I had to write a poem that had yoo-hoo in it, right? So that's your assignment for the next couple of weeks. Write a poem that says yoo-hoo. This book was produced, for the past maybe 4 or 5 years I've been working every summer. I have a week-long poetry workshop that I do. It's a women's writers retreat, and it was kind of haphazard. It's not associated with any group. It's just literally about 20 years ago, a bunch of women in Albany decided that they wanted to have a women's writers retreat. And so they organized themselves, and they began to rent what's the Marion Lodge. Now some of you might know it. We're all up in Albany. It's up around Faro, up around Faro Mountain. And so I've been teaching a week-long poetry workshop every year for them for a while, and they're fairly conservative. They're older, they're conservative, they are not necessarily folks that have studied poetry formally in any way, but they are very dedicated poets. And so as I began to work with them, because we're living in the woods when we're up there, I began to, and they're fans of Mary Oliver, so I started with Mary Oliver. I said to myself, okay, these are folks that, let's think about what Mary Oliver does as a poet in terms of following what her vision is, and trying to see from the poems how she was framing her point of view, how she was framing her attention as she was going through. And so from that point I began to study. I spent 2 years studying Mary Oliver poems, breaking them down into exercises for the folks to do. But as I'm breaking down the exercises, of course I'm doing the poems. I'm doing the exercises myself. So I ended up with a book doing these, and so this is one of the things that's nice about that. So I'm going to actually read some of the poems from this series. I'm going to read one of the ones that was off of Oliver. It's one of my, actually this one is one of my favorites. It's a very sad poem, I think, anyways. But this is a kind of a Mary Oliver-ish. It was actually from an exercise on an Oliver poem. It's called The Sorry Neighbor. I just love the first line. I'm going to have to say it a couple of times. Vicissitudes descended upon the possum. Not good, I like that. Vicissitudes descended upon. Vicissitudes descended upon the possum, halting her, tossing her beneath the wheels, her body still soft, the pads of her long feet still soft, the strange tail stiff and scaled. Not her eyes, because her face was ruined, but how whole she remained, her silver flank, coarse hairs lifting in wind, that strange tail extended behind her. Snow shovel and a bag and a respectful attitude. And she will take these whole with her. Farewell, possum. Later there will be pangs and questions. Being possum, was I sure she was really dead? Am I sure she's a she? Did she have kits in her pouch? Yes, no, I didn't check. And so perhaps sent her children after her, and she will take these whole with her. What a sorry neighbor I am. The next one is actually for my parents. They both passed away a couple of years ago, and this one is actually, after I got done with Mary Oliver, I started to work with Louise Gluck, because you get bored with Oliver after a while. And so I was really working with Louise Gluck's The Wild Iris. And one of the differences is Gluck actually takes these wonderful little flowers and she speaks from their voice. So there were several poems where I'm like speaking. So this one is, when I bought my house, there were 2 ancient pear trees in the back. And I bought the house with money that I got because my parents died. So suddenly when your parents die, you get a chunk of money and you usually buy a house with it. That's what happens. But so I had pears in the back. Old pears. We are falling asleep one limb at a time. Our gnarled branches whisked with green. We have always lived side by side, crooked together, but at our age, careful not to touch or rub. Still a few blossoms, small sweet fruit for the squirrels, the fat woodchuck next door, insects, not our own grandchildren, true, but still loving sugar, discovered our secret pockets years ago and live in our hearts. Drowsing in the sun, we are still fruitful and palace to several queens, but you must forgive us. We are moving on, releasing what is dry, dead, just letting it fall away. So yeah, your parents do get bored with you after they die. Their agonizing speed. And this is a true story, absolutely true. All summer the slugs dash the open lawn, glistening hyphens yawning over grass, plump yellow flecks and drag. Last night I saw one chase another down, implacable. Watch the pair strain across the sea of grass, one tongue throwing forward, interminable motion, the other surging after, eggs stuck to her back, her rasped teeth grasping after the tail of the first. All night long the 2 crept toward the lilac, oblivious to anything except the other, in the throes of what desire or vengeance, out of what passion or desperation or need, that old story, for all the agonizing speed of slugs. I'm going to do one more Gluck takeoff, and this one's coneflower. This is for all the teachers in the room, which is like pretty much everybody, right? There we go. Coneflower, you know what coneflowers are? Those red ones. I mean the pink ones with those. You have to picture it because it has to do with the image of it. All July, our spiky copper ochre eyes will nod and gaze at the sun. All great teachers appear foolish at first, gaudy purple petals radial and flung back, painting ourselves silly. And by August, shears mislaid, you'll learn perfect neglect as we go to seed, our flower heads blackened, held aloft on rattling stem, a feast for goldfinches, and so in the end, glorious. So when I got done with Gluck, then I was like, okay, all these modernists, these fairly normal, so I said to myself, well, what happened was a kid, an undergraduate, came to me and wanted me to do an honors thesis with her on Diane Prima. And I was very comfortable about doing that, but then I started to think, I was like, geez, Diane Prima, what would those old Catholic ladies think about Diane Prima? Because I got all quirky, right? So I was like, all right, well, let's start to work on Loba. Let's bring this kind of incantatory, shamanic practice up to the old blue-haired Catholic ladies, and let's see what they do with it, right? So they had a great time with it. They really loved it. My work with the Prima actually led to a couple of poems that I'm kind of pleased with, and so I'm going to end with these. One's a fairly long poetry, a fairly long series, but this one is, I kind of like this. Lies about the crow. Oh, De Prima did the wolf, and so when I was doing mine, and it's interesting with the crow, because I had worked with crows earlier, and then in the process of doing this book, the crows kind of came back, because they come back, they kind of sit outside your window and they yell at you, so you're kind of, oh, I guess I should write them. De Prima wrote about wolves. What should I write about? Meanwhile, the crow's going, air, air, air. I'm like, okay, I hear you, So basically, the crows kind of took up the position for me of the Loba. But anyways, lies about the crow. That she can't be trusted. That she loves death. That her eyes are black diamonds. That she's spiteful. That she doesn't know your name. That she doesn't see you park the car, head in with all those groceries. That she can't count higher than 3. That she doesn't know who her friends are. That her feathers weren't charred chasing the sun. That she's not afraid of hawks. That she's not afraid of cats. That she's not afraid of guns or poisons. That she's mean. That she'll spear her beak toward a living eye. That she doesn't worry after her little ones. That she couldn't pick you out of a line. So, and I'll end with this one. This is a longer series. It's called Wheat Crow. It's in, I think, 5 parts. And there's 2 things I have to gloss, I think, in it. One of them is and everybody misses this, and I think it's clear as a bell. You know when you're drawing a cartoon image of, you know, and you want to show something's dead, you put a cross across their eye? Okay, that's what you need to remember. Cross across the eye means something's dead. That comes back. And the other thing is Yggdrasil, which is the name of the world tree in Norse mythology. That's the tree that Woden hung on while he was waiting for the runes of truth. I mean, so he loses an eye and he gets all crippled and then he hangs from the tree until words come to him. So this is the North emergence of language. We crow. 1. Voices like door hinges shriek, shoved open, groan of the wind across the roof ridge, where your claws slide across slate, clutches, scratch, crude letters, help, farewell. Your message, illegible and clear, we are choir of your tragic circumstance, witness to your hopeless holding on. We are neighbors on a quiet block, black caps pulled down over our faces. We are bitter family, resenting the curses that dog us, hear us, jeer at the way the world turns on us, the way it turns to us, eyes like stars piercing pinholes in blanket night. 2. Perches on a wire or swoops, ragged, raging black, appearing out of nowhere, shouts after cats or jokes with a girl at the bus stop, countless, common, ominous as lightning, as a freckle, as an unanswered caw. Who keeps cruel hawks from your young? Who knows the tricks you use to cheat your debts? Who picks up earrings, shoestrings, condom wrappers, and change? Its possibility slips from your pocket, rolls to the curb, and gleams from a gutter. All those pieces of silver. Who else mutters along with your prayers, shifting from foot to foot, bowing and asking for bread, or some jewel you've lost? Whose call mocks you, wakes you, makes you look? 3. Black X against the blue, the eye of everything. Stark cross, silent crossed, the sun momentarily darkened, carrion eater, connoisseur of guts, corpses sweeten on the shoulder of the road. When someone fails to safely cross, traverse, travail, the crushing wheel, we call. The eye we pluck sees nothing just as well as you. 4. Feather from the wing of a black angel, or the scorched hand that flaps across the corn, raven, ill-omened companion to death goddesses and battle shrews, cry, oracle, oracle, hero is slain, his flesh defiled. Take us at our word, grim, ungainly, ghastly, gaunt, ancient of days, ask our entrails who your daddy is. Feast us with your stale bread, congealed meat stuck to a styrofoam box. Chase us with shotguns and dogs. We croak, we gather near your open graves and mock your pieties in tones you can't help but understand. 4. Raven that flew around the flooded world until the waters were gone, brilliant white bird blackened from stealing the sun. As the crow flies north of despair, east of bad news, we roost along the margins of the hospital parking lot, crowding bare trees like ominous croaking fruit, as well as in the branches of Yggdrasil, where some god hangs, waiting for word. Thank you very much.